I want to talk about season 5. As you mentioned, she's sort of devoting her time to her role as a surgeon and as a healer in the community. How important was that for you to show her passion for her work and finding ways to sort of utilize her knowledge?
Yeah, well, I think it was really important. You know, I think one of the storylines this season that Claire decides to try and cultivate penicillin, you know, it wasn't just about the fact that she's trying to make this medicine. It was so much more about trying to be the sort of master of her own destiny and protecting this family and this community that have built up around her. And definitely, you know, that storyline went through some different rewrites and you know, I definitely at one point, I think they were almost giving the discovery to Marcelly. And I was like, you cannot do that to me. You can't do that to Claire. You know, this is something she's worked so hard on. You can't just give it away. So I think it's really important. I think it's good to see, you know, the idea of being fulfilled is a multifaceted thing. And it's also, it changes and you go through different phases in your life. And I think, you know, last season they were setting up this home. They were finding their feet and she didn't really have time to invest in that side of herself. But this season with being settled, I think it was really important that we get to see her sort of create the life that she would really love to have for herself.
How did you feel about the maggots as scene partners?
I was fine with the maggots, except for the fact that they stank. We have an animal wrangler, Dave, who works on the show, and I think he gets given these kind of crazy, you know, orders every so often, you know, find us rats, find us maggots, and who knows where they come from. But these particular maggots came from rotting flesh, a carcass of some animal. And he brought them onto the set and I sort of sent him off to wash them because they just stank of rotting meat, which was really gross. And when you're going to spend, you know, an hour or two playing with them, it's not the nicest smell to have around you. But yeah, I don't know, like things like that. As long as it's not cockroaches, I'm fine. If that was a bucket of cockroaches, you would not have seen me with a camera or like looking at them so closely. I would be screaming like a little child somewhere in a corner.
What did you think about the dancing this season?
Yeah, so in this sequence, Jamie dances. In the book, it's a sword dance, and it was written in the script as a sword dance as well. He's, you know, in this town, Brownsville, and for a moment, just enjoying the moment. And it's a really, really nice sequence. But I wanted to change it slightly, and I actually ended up doing a Highland fling. I'm not I wouldn't say a dancer at heart, but I got some lessons from a good friend of mine who used to be a professional Highland dancer, and the dance is actually really interesting. It's about kicking off the shackles of the British, you know, kicking off the trousers, the trews that they were supposed to wear. When the kilts were banned, you know, Scotsmen had to then start wearing trousers or as you guys call them, pants. And so the whole dance was sort of a defiant dance about, you know, kicking off the shackles of the British. So it's a fun moment and nice to see Jamie and Claire sharing a moment as well. But yeah, I think that day I was slightly nervous about it.
So I also need to ask you about a scene from the snake episode. And I think you know which one I'm talking about. Fans were very impressed by Claire's ability to resuscitate Jamie through an unconventional medical method. What did you think about like this narrative choice? Like, what did you think when you read that scene?
I mean, I had read it in the book, so I knew it was coming at some point. But there are certain things you can read in a book and then you have to put them into practice and it doesn't always translate. You know, I think Sam and I really, we sort of went over that and I think in many ways as well, the writers were like, okay, you two figure out what you want to do with this scene, because everyone was a little bit like, we have to do it because it's one of the fans' favorite sort of scenes, but figure out what kind of way you guys are comfortable with it. You know, there is no real, you know, motioning. I think that was, they sort of alluded to that more in the camera than actually happened. But what we really wanted to do, and I think, you know, Sam and I wanted to find a really intimate and really grounded way of trying to portray this scene. And, you know, it took me back to the scene with Master Raymond in L'Hôpital des Anges when Claire was dying. And there is something about Claire, you know, she does have some kind of spidey senses. We've seen it before where she's able to read whether it's a skull or something. She knows what's happened to it. She does have this sort of otherworldly senses about her. And so we sort of kept going back to this idea that, you know, the first thing when you're born that's important is that skin to skin touch. And we were, you know, for Claire, she has to believe. I mean, I don't think as an audience, anyone really felt that Jamie was going to die. But for Claire, she had to believe that he was dying. And so we had to make it very, very real for the characters who were in that scene. And so for me, I think she, you know, as much as she is his lover and his wife, when you're in a couple like that, you sort of become all aspects for each other. And I wanted it to be almost this mothering, that if she believed he was actually going to be, like he was going to die in that moment, that she was going to cradle him and hold him and hold that space for him as he passed, because that's what she believes in that moment. So that's what the whole skin to skin was. And it's that thing of just, I think she wanted to imprint upon herself the memory of his body and the memory of him, and to just, you know, it's almost like wrapping her body around him to protect him and hold him. Yeah. So and to be honest, you know, I think we found a really loving, sensitive way of doing a scene that, you know, when you first read it, you're like, what? Diana Gabaldon, what were you on?
So the dynamic between Jamie and his son-in-law, Roger, has been interesting to watch. You know, Jamie has had his reservations about Roger, but with time, they have reached a real respect for each other, and Roger comes into his own. How is it sort of having another modern character teach Jamie another way to be?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. You know, certainly this season, the arc for those two characters is a long one and a slow one, but they do go a sort of a full circle where, you know, Jamie at the very beginning, the very first episode, the first scene, we see Jamie shaving his soon-to-be stepson, and he really doesn't think that this man from the future has the abilities to survive and sort of be a man of Jamie's time and be a good husband to his daughter. So he's very he's rather unsure about him. But, you know, throughout the whole season, they do learn this new respect, and it certainly is that Roger has a different way of approaching things. He's not so much a man of action, he's a man of intellect. And I think Jamie really learns to, you know, admire that there's a different way of doing things. And actually, that's how Claire has always treated Jamie. You know, she's always taught him, being a woman from the future, she's always taught him there are other ways of approaching things and doing them in a different manner.
So this season also marked the end of a fan favorite character, Murtagh Fraser. He's Jamie's godfather and his connection to Scotland. And while fans may have saw it coming, that didn't make it any easier. So I'm curious, how did you feel about reaching this point?
This was really sad and, you know, a really strong storyline. In fact, probably one of my favorite storylines I've had. Certainly one of the strongest as an actor to play. Murtagh in the books dies at Culloden, so it would have been the beginning of season 2. The writers and showrunner, they decided to keep him on because he's such a great character, and he provided this constant companion for Jamie, this silent father figure. And he really was a real bond of love there and loyalty. But in our story, you know, he becomes the leader of the regulators, the people sort of rebelling against the British. And Jamie's commanded to align himself with the British. And that's been something that Jamie's always fought against and really he's obviously pretending he doesn't want to do that, but he has to go out and hunt down his godfather. And it comes to a head, and his godfather unfortunately dies. And it's sad because Jamie's also not only losing his godfather and his father figure, but actually losing a little bit of Scotland. You know, this character represented everything that Jamie, the sort of old way of life, the old sort of Scottish Highlander way of living, the Gallic culture, everything that man represents, he's lost. So it's big for Jamie.
Well, and Jamie has experienced a lot of grief in the last few seasons. So how was it sort of finding your way through Jamie's grief about losing his godfather?
Yeah, it was so well written, the episode, and it's my favorite episode I think I've shot for a long time. You know, a great battle sequence, which I really enjoy. The initial spark to the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Alamance, and it wasn't really actually much of a battle, but you know, we did it justice, I think, in the show. And but Jamie is asked to wear a red coat, which is something that I fought for and pushed for in the show. It's not in the books, but I thought, you know, the visual implications, but also what it meant to Jamie to put on this red coat, something that he's fought against the British Empire. You know, a lot of Jamie's past, a lot of his suffering has been down to the redcoats, to Blackjack Randall, to Culloden. So yeah, it was really difficult for him morally and honorably to sort of put on this jacket and to fight on the side of the British. As Murtagh pretty much dies in his arms, you know, there are the various stages of grief. And I really wanted, first of all, the first thing I wanted to see was Jamie as the boy again, suddenly as a child, lost. And I think you might possibly see that for a moment. And then his disbelief, you know, he doesn't believe that he's dead. He won't believe he's dead. Then it turns into anger. Then, you know, obviously sorrow, and then rage, and all these various stages of grief. And I think it really affects him, but not only Jamie, it affects the whole population at Fraser's Ridge. We see Jocasta, you know, who had a love affair with him, and Claire, and everyone there, you know, everyone. He was a good friend and a good ally to everyone. And not only in the show as a character, but actually the actor for real. You know, we really were very sad to lose Duncan Lacroix, who plays Murtagh. He's an amazing guy.
What was filming that battle like? Because it's a battle unlike any we've seen on the show before. Like, there's muskets and a difference to it. So how was that sort of navigating?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, it's always a part of the show that I love, but it just shows how the world is evolving and modernizing. And, you know, the last battle we see at Culloden, you know, Jamie's part of the Highland Charge, this ancient form of battle that for many hundreds of years was very effective. But part of the reason that the British win is that they've learned to overcome that with muskets and a new style of fighting. And when we get to America, we see, it's now become like guerrilla warfare. It's muskets and cannon, and is a very different style of fighting. And those days were great fun to shoot. We really enjoyed that because it had been a while since I'd been beaten up. So it was fun to lay out some justice.
I imagine the weather probably wasn't the greatest, especially wearing all that garb. It probably felt even like more intense.
You actually hit it on the head. It was summer in Scotland, which normally only lasts for about 2 days. This time we were fortunate. We had about 2 weeks of very warm sunshine in Scotland, and we were shooting, and obviously all that equipment and the jackets and the coats and running around fighting. It was pretty intense, pretty tough. You know, we have a lot of extras there, a lot of other actors and horses, and there's so much that goes on. And it's remarkable that we managed to shoot that, I think, in maybe 2 days. We did go back to do pickups, and actually we had to reshoot the sort of realization in the tent where Jamie realizes that Murtagh is actually dead. We had to reshoot that on the very last day of filming, you know, like a month or 2 months later. So that's kind of the challenge that you get as an actor. Sometimes you have to throw yourself back into where you were emotionally, and sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's okay. And yeah, it's these are the challenges of, I guess, working on a TV show.